It started with a calendar invite. No context, no subject line, just a meeting scheduled for 3:30 p.m., sent by someone I hadn't spoken to directly in months. My name is Evan Wolf. I'm 41 years old. I was a senior product strategist for a mid-sized fintech company in Chicago. I lived alone in a quiet apartment just west of the Loop, a place with too much glass and too little warmth, but it was mine. The moment everything shifted wasn't dramatic. It wasn't a blow-up. It wasn't a scene. It was an empty room on the 12th floor, a silent HR rep and Tom Aldridge sitting across from me with that same bored expression he wore during every quarterly check-in. He didn't even bother to say my name. Just, "We've decided to go in a different direction." That was it. That was the line, the one they used when they wanted to sound mutual, when they wanted to seem like a brand strategy, not a decision made behind closed doors 3 weeks ago when I stopped laughing at his jokes. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I listened. I nodded. I let them hand me the envelope, then I left. The air outside hit different, cold like something had been vacuum sealed and opened for the first time. The city didn't care. The traffic moved the same. A group of interns smoked just outside the building, still wearing their badges, still smiling that temporary smile that comes from not yet being disillusioned. I stood there for a second, not sure where to go. My hands were empty. No box of desk things, no framed photo, nothing to mark that I'd spent 6 years of my life inside that building. 6 years. I used to think hard work could shield you, that showing up early and staying late would build some kind of invisible armor around you. I believed that meritocracy wasn't a myth, just mismanaged. But that's not how it works when someone with power decides your presence is inconvenient, especially when you stop entertaining them. Tom wasn't overt. He didn't need to be. Men like him have mastered the art of implication. At first it was harmless, or seemed that way. Comments about my shirts, about how buttoned up I was, about how I should loosen up at happy hour. Then came the invitations, not to meetings, to drinks, to networking events that never appeared on my team's calendar. And when I declined, always politely, the tone shifted. I was labeled distant, then not collaborative. Then came the performance concerns. It was textbook. I knew better than to make a scene. I didn't write a long email. I didn't post online. I didn't call a lawyer that afternoon. But I did one thing. I forwarded every email to my personal account, every Slack message, every "Hey, can I grab you for a quick second?" Because I knew where it was heading. And I wasn't going to let them rewrite the story. It started slowly, as most betrayals do. Not with a confrontation, but with distance. Projects I'd usually lead were reassigned. Meetings I was once central to suddenly didn't include me. My Slack notifications got quieter, then cold. At first I thought I was imagining it. You always think that at the beginning. That maybe you've been too tense, too closed off. That maybe it's burnout. So I tried to adjust, smiled more, asked more questions in stand-ups, shared personal anecdotes in those awkward morning check-ins that managers believe simulate culture. But nothing changed. Worse, it became clearer that my effort was the punchline. There was one day, a Tuesday in February, when the team held a spontaneous brainstorm in the lounge area, glass walls and all. I saw it happening from my desk. I watched as my project was dissected without me. I watched Tom point to wireframes I had designed, spinning them as examples of what not to overcomplicate. He didn't look at me, not once. When the meeting ended, I stayed sitting. I didn't move, just watched my cursor blink in a half-written email I no longer wanted to send. Something inside me shifted that day. I stopped performing. I stopped softening my voice in meetings. I stopped pretending I didn't know what was happening. And I started saving everything. Emails, Slack threads, revisions, timestamps, even casual comments that seemed innocuous at first. I created a folder in my personal cloud drive labeled "Just in Case," not because I was planning to sue, not because I wanted revenge, because I wanted the truth. That folder became my anchor. When Tom told the VP I had missed a deadline he'd quietly moved up without informing me, I had the screenshots. When he claimed I was resistant to feedback, I had the Slack threads where I'd asked for clarification and got no response. When he said I was withdrawing from team culture, I had calendar records showing every skipped 1-1 and every ignored reschedule request. It didn't stop the inevitable, but it kept me sane. I remember one evening in March, about a month before they let me go, I stayed late in the office long after everyone else had left. Not to work, just to sit. The place felt different after dark, quieter, honest. The polished surfaces and exposed brick didn't perform as much. I walked into the break room, opened the fridge, saw the same sad leftover birthday cake from someone's awkward afternoon celebration. Half of it eaten. The other half waiting for a trash bin no one wanted to touch first. That's what it felt like, the whole thing. A place where you celebrate just enough to mask the rotting. Tom didn't hate me. That would have been easier. He just saw me as a mirror he didn't like looking into. I didn't laugh at his power. I didn't excuse his oversteps. I didn't pretend ignorance when he leaned too close at off-site retreats or made jokes that turned air into stone. I wasn't fun for him. So I was no longer useful. They didn't call it a firing. Of course they didn't. They called it a strategic reorganization. Said my role was being sunsetted, that the company was evolving its priorities, that while my contributions had been deeply appreciated, the time had come for a shift. It happened on Zoom, a Friday morning, 10:00 a.m. sharp. I got the invite 5 minutes before, no agenda. HR was on the call. So was Tom. She smiled like she was offering me tea. He didn't smile at all. They read from a script, every word carefully scrubbed of emotion, the kind of language that gets cleared by legal. Clean corporate, devastating in its sterility. I listened. I nodded. I muted myself when I exhaled too loud. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. When they finished, Tom added, "I know this probably comes as a surprise." That was the only time I looked directly into the camera. "It doesn't," I said. There was a pause, not long, just enough to make him shift in his chair. Then the HR rep took back over, outlined the severance, the transition support, the company laptop return policy. She said I had 24 hours to return my equipment. I thanked them both. Calm, polite. And when I clicked leave meeting, I sat in silence for 7 full minutes, not thinking, not feeling, just breathing. Then I opened my folder, the one labeled "Just in Case." I renamed it. I called it "For When They Rewrite the Story," because they would. They always do. By Monday, the company announced a mutually respectful transition on the internal newsletter. My photo was gone from the team page by Wednesday. No goodbye messages, no final Slack emojis. I had been erased, except I wasn't, not really, because I still had the folder. And I still had my name, and I still had my truth. I printed the documents, labeled them, stored them in a locked drawer in my apartment, not because I wanted to hurt anyone, but because I refused to let them decide what I had been. I didn't go on LinkedIn that week. I couldn't stomach the New Beginnings posts or the colleagues who reshared the announcement like it was some neutral change of tides. They knew. Some of them had watched it happen in real time. The sudden silences, the reassigned accounts, the meetings I used to lead getting spun off into new leadership pilots. But no one reached out. Not really. Except Jordan. She messaged the night after the firing, one line: I saw what happened. I'm sorry, you didn't deserve that. I stared at that message for a long time. I started typing 3 different responses, deleted all of them. Then I finally wrote back, thank you. That means more than I can say. She didn't push, just sent a thumbs up. But it was the first time in days I felt like a person again. The truth is, it had started long before the Zoom call. It started the night he lingered too long after the holiday dinner. It was an off-site retreat. December, the usual small talk, the carefully timed toasts. He stood beside me as I reached for dessert, made a joke about how I must be the sweet kind. I laughed it off. I always laughed it off. Then he asked if I wanted to grab another drink. I said I was heading up early. He smiled just enough to show teeth and said, "You're not fun, are you?" That word stuck. Fun. As if my worth at the company, at my job, hinged on being someone he could sip whiskey with after hours. From that night on, something shifted, slowly, like water seeping under a locked door. My biggest client was reassigned in January. No explanation, just leadership rebalancing. My budget got cut in February, not across the board, just mine. By March, I was no longer CC'd on the strategy calls I used to lead. They said I was too process-oriented, said I lacked flexibility, said I was resistant to culture evolution. They never once said I was underperforming, because I wasn't. What they meant, though, was clear. I didn't play, I didn't flirt, I didn't entertain. And I didn't let him feel comfortable around my silence. I'd always believed that if you kept your head down and your work sharp, no one could touch you. But I was wrong. Because sometimes silence itself makes them uneasy, makes them reach for control, and when they can't charm you, they'll try to erase you. I started saving everything that spring: emails, Slack messages, calendar invites, screenshots of times changes, team shifts. I documented when I was removed from the lead on a campaign I built from the ground up. I made note of a 1-1 where he said I wasn't present enough in the softer parts of leadership. And then there was the team off-site. April. It was one of those faux casual, highly curated bonding events, a winery. He made a toast and I stayed seated. Didn't laugh when he tried to roast me about being the operations iceberg, calm up top, sharp below. Afterwards, I was told I seemed distant, that my energy wasn't aligned with the company culture. Funny how culture always means compliance in a blazer. In May, HR scheduled a check-in. Nothing serious, they said. Just taking the pulse. The questions were careful. Was I happy in my role? Did I feel integrated with my peers? How did I see myself growing here? It wasn't a conversation, it was inventory. They were already boxing me for exit. So I stopped answering. Not entirely, just enough. Short, neutral replies, smiles without teeth. I showed up, did the work, logged everything. And I waited because I knew something they didn't. I wasn't afraid anymore. The day they fired me was a Thursday, 3:45 p.m. I was invited to a quick sync with HR and my director. The invite came 10 minutes before it started. Classic move. No agenda, just a vague subject line, team alignment chat. I already had my documents open. I already knew. When I joined the call, their faces were composed the kind of fake neutral that HR professionals practice in workshops. My director cleared his throat and said something about shifts in organizational structure. Then came the phrases you don't forget, not because they're personal, but because they're surgically not realignment of team resources. Leadership cohesion, future fit capabilities. And then, this isn't a reflection of your character or performance. I almost laughed, almost. They told me I'd receive a severance package. They offered to write me a letter of recommendation as if they weren't rewriting my name in hushed tones already. Then they asked if I had any questions. I said no. I said thank you. I said I understood. What I didn't say was that I'd already spoken to a labor attorney, that I already had the timeline printed and notarized, that I'd already drafted the complaint with everything documented, the jokes, the invitations, the unexplained removals, the shifts in team reporting, the off-hours messages from his personal number. I didn't need to cry. I didn't need to explain. I didn't need to be loud. They cut the call. I stared at the blank screen for a minute, then exhaled. Not because I was relieved, but because I was ready. They thought they'd taken something from me. But all they did was give me proof. The day after I was let go, I didn't touch my phone. No posts, no calls, no mass texts saying I'd been restructured. I just sat with it, the stillness, the strange freedom that comes not with relief but with clarity. They were careful. The documentation they gave me was polished. No mention of performance issues, but also no acknowledgement of what led to the fracture. A severance agreement with a non-disparagement clause, NDA, and a mutual release. Standard. I didn't sign it. Instead, I met with my attorney again. She read through everything I'd compiled, the Slack messages that started friendly, then veered too personal. The invitations to drinks that turned into repeated comments about how I was hard to read, closed off, not warm. The reviews that praised my output but flagged me for emotional unavailability. We didn't talk about lawsuits, we talked about patterns, we talked about leverage, we talked about how this happens quietly often and how most people don't bother speaking because by the time you're out, you just want to heal. But I wasn't here to burn the place down. I just wanted it recorded. I filed a formal complaint with the EEOC, then I forwarded the timeline to their legal department. No threats, no anger, just facts, dates, screenshots, a clean ledger of silence. Weeks passed. I got a letter, then a call, then an offer, a revised agreement with acknowledgement of circumstances and a compensation figure that told me they understood I wasn't bluffing. I signed that one, not because I wanted the money. Because I wanted my version in the file. I wanted them to know I noticed, that I remembered, that even in silence I was awake. Sometimes I still pass that building on 6th and Pine. The office lights are different now. New tenants, new logos. The faces I used to nod to in elevators are gone, or maybe just buried behind someone else's eyes. I don't feel anger when I see it. I don't feel anything really, just space, just air. There's a photo on my desk from the week I got hired. I'm in the break room laughing. Someone had just brought in a cake for my birthday. I was wearing a blue shirt that I've since donated. My eyes were clear. I didn't know yet what I was walking into. I leave the photo there not as a reminder of betrayal, but of presence. That I showed up, that I did the work, that I was there. Since then I've moved on, not up, not down, just forward. I work with a smaller team now, remote, quiet, intentional. I write, I design systems, no back channels, no invitations dressed as opportunities. Just clean respect. There's a kind of power in choosing not to perform, not to laugh when it's not funny, not to entertain what was never about merit to begin with. I don't tell this story for pity. I tell it for the man who's still sitting in his car after work wondering if it's him or if something unspoken is pressing against his ribs, stealing his breath, softening his edges. If this felt familiar, I hope you know you're not the only one who stayed silent. And not all silence is surrender. Sometimes it's strategy. Sometimes it's the only honest thing left. Sometimes it's a beginning. This is mine, and I'm done writing it now.